Hey guys, this is going to be a start to finish video on refining 925 silver into 999 silver rounds and stamping them for a friend of mine at Silverstruck. I always start with silver jewelry, broken jewelry, twisted chains, things like that. And the first step in anything is to remove the springs and to remove the stones and then to burn off any waxes or oils that are left on the 925. If you don't do this, you will end up with this weird brown mixture in your solution. It's a pain in the butt. You end up having to double refine it. So the best thing to do is just take a few minutes and really pull out everything you can. Any stones, any springs, and I'm talking like the little tiny springs in the round clasps on the ends of necklaces. It sounds crazy, but those things in nitric acid instantly turn to rust and it just ruins your solution. Once your sterling is super clean, start by heating it up to about 180 degrees. Then you're going to add your nitric acid. You're going to start with a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 parts distilled water, 1 part nitric acid, and that nitric acid is going to be a 70% nitric acid. This is where it gets really dangerous, more so than just nitric acid burns. That orange smoke is nitric dioxide. And unless you're really comfortable with chemicals, you should not do this. That stuff is a neurotoxin. It creates long-term issues. So be really careful. Once all your silver is dissolved, throw a little bit of extra silver in just to use up the nitric acid that's in there, and then let it cool overnight to room temperature. Once you're at that point, you can start to filter it. You're going to use a Buckner filter and a glass filter paper, and you just essentially run the solution through it, collecting all of the crap up in the filter. You'll end up with a crystal clear blue fluid. This is where the magic happens. You're going to put the silver nitrate into a beaker and precipitate it out using an ion swap with copper. You're going to take pure copper bars, make sure they're really clean. I hang mine with a copper wire, and when you put them into the solution, it will instantly start to form metallic silver on the copper, and that silver will just flake off. In this video, I'm trying to entertain my 11-year-old and get him off the Xbox for 5 minutes. It lasted about 30 seconds, which is pretty good. We take this copper bar and we set it in, and watch, it's going to start forming silver immediately. You see the copper bar? What? Now watch, it'll start flaking off and falling off, and that is pure elemental silver. What it's doing is it's swapping places with the copper. Isn't that cool? Watch. That's pure elemental silver now. Metal silver.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
So you just leave that in there?
Yep. Leave it in, and then, next hour or two, it's all going to precipitate out, is what it's called.
Oh, wow. Pretty cool. That's a very glitter.
Oh, you just missed a big chunk of it fall off.
Oh,
That was really cool.
I just saw it.
Yeah. Now it's just waiting and watching. It'll take a few hours for most of it to precipitate out, and then you usually leave them overnight. They'll form these big pillows while it's getting all the silver out of solution. Once all the silver is precipitated out, you're going to filter it again through the Buchner funnel with a glass paper until you have all the silver cement really clean. You're going to do that a bunch of times, and then you're going to start to dry it. You want to make sure it's really dry. If there's any moisture in that cement, you got a pretty good chance of it exploding in your furnace. This is the first chance you get to see what kind of yield you produced. If you can get around 90 to 91%, you're doing pretty good. You can melt down just the cement, but it's really difficult when it's this dry because it just blows away when you try to put a torch to it. So I always like to melt mine down in the furnace and then pour it into shot. Nothing goes perfect, and in this circumstance, I ended up contaminating the shot. Well, that's a bummer. I melted down about 800 grams of silver cement and contaminated it, either with the crucible or in the water I used for the shot. But you can see it's pretty contaminated. That was a pour and it looks terrible, so I'm gonna have to refine it again, so it'll be double refined. This is the second half of the double refined batch. I had 1,000 total grams of refined silver that got contaminated when I went to make it to shot. Got contaminated in a bad crucible, so I am refining it again. Start off with again 500 grams of silver, and I start with 1,000 milliliters of distilled water. I like to bring it up to temperature before I put the nitric acid in. I just feel like I can control a runaway reaction better if it's already hot. I don't have to watch it so closely. So I'll let that heat up for a minute, and then we'll put in 100 milliliters of distilled nitric acid. All right, so now we're up to about 130, that's fine. So I'm gonna start adding the nitric acid slowly. So I got 100 milliliters of distilled nitric acid. You can see it immediately starts to eat away at the contaminated surface of that shot. That'll start reacting, and we'll let it cook for about an hour, hour and a half, and then start adding 50-50 dilute nitric acid and distilled water. That's a perfect boil. It is just underneath a runaway, so it's going to be the most efficient. That nitric dioxide's super dangerous. That stuff's wicked poisonous. So when I ever get close to it, I'm always either wearing a respirator, holding my breath, having a fan blowing away from us, whatever I can do to stay clear of that stuff. I'll walk in so you can see what it looks like. Perfect. So now I just got to maintain that until all that silver is dissolved. Just put in another 50 milliliters. You can see how clear and clean that nitric acid, or silver nitrate, is what it's developing into. And that's because this is a double refined silver nitrate. So there's very little impurities. This is probably 98%. Maybe a little bit less, because like I had mentioned, I had some contamination when I did my shot, either from the crucible or from the water. So running a second refining is definitely going to come out looking really clean and pure. But I love how clear that silver nitrate is. So I just put in only about 25, maybe a little less, milliliters, and you can see how quick that thing reacts. The bubbles like that is the beginning of a runaway, but it's already starting to calm down, so I'm sure it'll be all right. I'm just going to sit here and watch it for a little while. That nitric acid is room temperature, and it doesn't immediately mix with the distilled water or the solution now, so it takes a little while for it to circulate around, but it will. I'll know if it's going to run away. I'll know in the next 30 seconds. And you can see why I let it settle down and run the nitric acid out, because I wanted to look through it, because when it's boiling like this, you can't see anything inside. So I'm really happy with this double refined batch. I'm sure it's going to make some pretty awesome silver. All right, so next day I always let my stuff settle overnight and cool down. I threw a bunch of extra shot from that big pot that I'm refining again. Threw that in there just to eat up all the rest of the nitric acid, since I'm going to use it up in another batch anyways. So, but it came out really clear, beautiful blue. So now it's going to be filtering. So I'm going to filter it using a Buckner funnel and a filter flask. That's a 4,000 milliliter, I think. Yeah, 4,000. And a little vacuum pump. And so the first thing you got to do is you got to grab a filter paper. And these are, which ones are these? These are 110 millimeter, grade 1 glass papers. You got to shoot that with a little bit of water. Make sure there's no wrinkles. I think that wrinkle ain't gonna work. You want it to lay as flat as possible so nothing gets underneath it. Always turn on your vacuum pump way in advance and let it pull that filter all the way down tight. You'll hear it start hissing. There it is. All right, now it's just a matter of filtering the solution. I usually use a long piece of medical grade tube like this, and I will filter it from there so that I don't pull any of the sediment off the bottom. And then the end of it, obviously just pull the sediment, pour it all the way in, and just let the sediment clog up the holes. It just makes it a lot faster if you use a tube. So I'll get that done, then pick it back up. All right, so got it all into the Buckner funnel, Buchner, whatever it's called, and you can see it pulling through the glass there, glass fiber filter. And all that gray black that's on the bottom, I'm pretty sure my contamination was two things. It was graphite from the furnace. I think it was an old crucible, and also I may have had some copper in that crucible that contaminated, and that is probably why I'm getting such a blue color. But anyways, all of that black that's caught in the filter is obviously impurities. And now what we end up with is
now for a little pure silver
super crystal
precipitation
clear
porn.
silver nitrate.
Just sit back and enjoy. So I'm not going to bore you with filtering out the silver cement and drying it. I already showed that earlier. Same process. I then melted everything in my furnace, poured it into shot, started making rounds.
So today I'm going to melt down a couple of rounds that I cast yesterday. I'm just not real happy with them, and I'm kind of OCD like that. So these are going to be used for YouTube coins, and like you can see on this one, it's got a little bit of a crater in there, and you know, I want this to be able to stamp really good. Plus the back looks like the surface of the moon, which I'm not happy with. So I'm going to heat up my mold a little bit hotter, and then see if I can't even that out and get a better pour so that my buddy at Silverstruck can have some really cool blanks for his YouTube coins. So here we go. So I use oxyacetylene torch with a number 2 tip. It's really small. It's almost like a jeweler's tip. It's made for fine welding. I like that because it keeps the heat super tight. And as you can see, I'm inside my garage, and I really don't want, you know, a giant flame and a huge amount of heat blowing all over the place. Number 1, always got an ABC fire extinguisher right nearby, some water, and yeah, try to be as safe as possible. I run my oxyacetylene at 10 and 5, so 10 pounds flowing on the oxygen, 5 pounds flowing on the acetylene. Again, that's like really small, but it's what I want to do here in my garage. When I use this thing for cutting or welding or whatever else, I got a bunch of other tips and I just crank it up. But it works good. So it's gonna get loud. I'm gonna put the heat on. It's gonna get loud, so I'm gonna put the heat on the mold and then start melting down that blank and see if we can't get a better pour. So here we go. So the first thing on the oxyacetylene is just crack the acetylene a little bit and just get a tiny flame going. Now you leave that out until it stops producing soot, right about there. Next, you're gonna wanna put on your oxygen, but for that, I'm gonna want my welding hood. So, we get our welding hood on, and then I crank on the oxygen, and I want a neutral flame, which means you bring the middle flame in until it meets that lower flame, and that's a nice neutral flame. Really small, really tight. So, here we go. We're gonna heat up the mold real good. We'll let this thing get super duper hot. I think that was the reason I was getting craters yesterday. So I just didn't have this thing hot enough. So I'm gonna heat it up real good. Let the butane, or the MAP gas, sorry, keep it hot. Now we can start heating up the round. See if I can show this to you guys. I will say the oxyacetylene makes really fast work of this compared to doing it with MAP gas. As you can see, it's already starting to liquefy and cool. Trying to do that with MAP gas would take you 3 or 4 minutes. With oxyacetylene, what is that, 30 seconds maybe? And I'm gonna let it get real hot and get a nice pool going. So let me put it back in the fire bricks. Once it gets to this stage, it's gonna start developing a really nice pool. You want that thing rolling. So while that's heating up, I'm gonna hit this mold a couple more times. Staying real hot. It's still got a good pool. Now it's about ready to pour. Give it another 10 or 15 seconds. Now you want to spin it so that if there are any impurities, they'll roll down. They'll get caught in the flux. Always heat the tip of the crucible before you pour. I think that's a much better pour. Let's see what the bottom side looks like. The mold was a little bit far away. Kind of stuck underneath this fire brick trying to keep some heat in, so I'm gonna have to pull it out for the next one. I can already tell you the top of it looks a lot better. Alright, let's see what the bottom of this looks like. Oh, that's better. I'm okay with that. Top looks real good. Pull it off. Announce Troy. Dry it off. I'm way happier with that. Some nice ripples in it. Once that shines up in the tumbler, it's going to be great. All right, we're ready to start pressing in the logo for my buddy at Silverstruck. These are his rounds. If you remember, we made these out of 925 sterling silver jewelry that was junk. A lot of single earrings, broken rings, twisted chains, things like that. I buy it in bulk, and we do the whole refining. You saw all that. So we cast these up in the last part of the video. Now we're ready to press them. I'm gonna anneal these, which is just get them hot and get the molecules moving, and then we're gonna push them in with the 20-ton press, the bottle jack. Alright. Get your mold or your stamp really centered. Tighten up the valve. And let's see what we get. Alright, that's about all I want to do there. I can see the stamp is flat. It's pretty stiff. It almost feels like you give it a couple more pulls and it's gonna pop something. That's about all I want. So we're gonna go ahead and release it and see what kind of impression we got. Alright. Now normally I would leave the round on the stamp just like this. I'd lower the deck, I'd put the stamp back in, and I would put my reverse maker's mark stamp on the back, and I would squeeze the two together like that. What can happen is if you pop it off and then you go to squeeze this on, you'll flatten some of the image and you won't get a really deep impression. For the sake of the video, I'm gonna pop it off, take a look at it, see if I like it, and you can usually re-index it back to get it set up, and then I'll drop the deck and I'll push the back maker's mark mold on. So just, come on, there it is. Pop it off, and you get a really nice impression just like that. Perfect. Now I'm gonna put it back on the mold, just like it was, and just take a few seconds to figure out where you are. Once you get it close, you can kind of wiggle it and it's gonna seat right there. Now I know it's right back where it was supposed to be. I'm gonna drop the deck and then press my maker mark into it as well. Set that guy back up. Get my reverse mark ready to go. I'm going to try to stamp it square in the middle and see where it comes out. Sometimes I like to also index where the top of the mold is, but since Silverstruck's mold is a perfect round, Don't really have to. I mean, it can your maker mark can kind of be anywhere. It's gonna take a little bit to get down to it. We'll re-index it when we get close. All right, so now center it. Make sure your stamp is right where you want it. I think that'll work out just fine. Get it tight. Oh, I don't like that. It shifted on me, so that's good that I double checked. It shifted right at the end, and I want this thing to be perfect, so we're gonna break off the bottle jack a little. Move my mold over, get it nice and centered, and hit it again. Right there. Good, that's better. All right, now we press in the maker's mark. I think that's about all I want to do. A little tiny bit more. What I'm looking for is I'm looking to see if the stamp is really flush with the silver. It looks pretty good. All right, let's give it a shot and see what it comes out. Good. Now these two are fused together. Perfect. All right. There's my maker's mark. All right. And let's get the, there we go. Rock on. Awesome. Still got really cool pour lines. Yeah, that's really nice. That's gonna clean up really good. My maker's mark is super crystal clear. Love that. 999 fine. Yeah, that's a really nice piece right there. So then I'll press the rest of these, and then I'll show you guys how to antique these to make them look.
Unfortunately, I
really
didn't
great.
video
Brings
any
out
of the
the
antiquing
color in really
process.
nice.
It's a process of heating them up and applying liver of sulfur and then polishing them after the fact. But they came out great, and I'm really thankful that Silverstruck gave me an opportunity to do these for him. Check out his YouTube channel. It's fantastic. And that's about it. If you have any questions, send me a message or leave me a comment below, and I'll try to get an answer to you.